There are often happenings in this world that make us question our humanity, observable dualities of the human condition. As with all missing person cases, there is an element of mystery and terror to them. This is one such case. Imagine your child is riding their bike, as they always do, as they're out and about within your community, and suddenly, as quickly as they stepped outside the front door and faded from your frame of vision, they disappear, never to be seen again. This case and other cases like it always seem to be on the verge of being solved, until we discover another kernel of evidence that seems to cycle us back to the beginning, a sempiternal cycle, rarely of which ever seems to end. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Tara Calico. Our story begins on September 20th, 1988, in Belen, New Mexico. This is where Tara Calico, her mother Patty, and stepfather Terry lived, in an upper middle class neighborhood there in Belen. Patty was once a native to Wichita, Kansas, and would marry and find her way first to Oklahoma and eventually New Mexico. Tara by this time was 19 years old and was a sophomore at the University of New Mexico. Due to her close proximity of her school, about a 30-minute drive or so, she had the advantage of being able to live at home while receiving her college education. Tara and her mother bonded over many things, but they especially bonded and enjoyed long-distance bike riding, and it was something they did together on a regular basis. Their usual route took them approximately 34 miles as a round trip and went along US Highway 47. They had biked together until recently, when Tara's mother suspected that they were being stalked by one or several motorists, and she soon became too scared to go out on their typical rides. Tara, however, believed her mother was being paranoid and decided that no one was going to stop her from doing what she loved to do. And although this was a brave and normally sensible move for an average person, it would prove to be a fatal error in this particular instance. On that fatal morning on September 20th, 1988, an unusually warm morning for that time of year, Tara was having breakfast with her family before she was set to head out on her usual biking trip. She told her mother that she had plans to play tennis with her boyfriend that day and to come pick her up if she hadn't returned by 12 p.m. that day. Her mother agreed and didn't think anything of Tara heading out to exercise. And as Tara mounted her neon pink Huffy bike with yellow control cables, little did both individuals know that this would be the last time they would ever see one another. When 11:30 a.m. approached and there was no sign of Tara, Patty began to set out and look for her. She drove down their usual route along Highway 47, but at this time, Tara was nowhere to be found. This was the 80s, so cell phones were not yet a common item, so she couldn't simply text or call Tara to discover her whereabouts. Patty's typical drive soon became, well, less typical. She drove the route several times and checked several surrounding areas, and still there was no sign of Tara. Beginning to panic, as any mother would, Patty almost immediately went to the authorities. The local police began to search the route and the surrounding areas as well, along with Terry, Tara's stepfather, and mother continuing their search simultaneously. And it was during this time that Patty found Tara's Sony Walkman music player about 100 yards off of Highway 47. They also discovered footprints on the ground that led to what might have been a scuffle on the site, and a short distance from there, bike tracks were also found matching Tara's Huffy. These tracks were located near vehicle tire track marks and an oil slick on a small stretch of road. However, besides these small pieces of potential evidence, there was still no signs of Tara. In the days to come, several people would come forward and have claimed to see Tara riding her pink bike along her normal route on the morning of her disappearance. And a picture began to emerge based on these eyewitness accounts. The witnesses claimed to have seen a light-colored 1953 Ford truck with a camper on the back, following her closely before she vanished. Although the color was never distinguished and the authorities were not able to track down the vehicle or its driver, the question still remains as to if this vehicle in particular was directly involved as to what happened to her. Tara Calico and her bike would never be found, and her case soon went cold, considering there was very limited details and evidence available at the time of her disappearance. Her family greatly feared that she would be discovered deceased somewhere, but also tried to keep it together and held on to a small thread of hope that she would also wander back through the door in which she left that warm September morning. Things hereon for a short while grew silent as no new evidence emerged. But in June of 1989, the cold case seemingly thawed back to life. A new piece of evidence was discovered in the parking lot of a convenience store located in Port St. Joseph in Florida. This new piece of evidence was a photograph that was found laying in between two vehicles and showed a shocking and disturbing scene. The woman who found the photo said that it was located near a white, windowless Toyota van of some kind, driven by a man in his mid to late 30s with a light-colored mustache. The photo showed a young woman and boy in the back of a van with tape over their mouths, with terrified looks on both of their faces. And given the color of the vehicle section available, it does appear to be white. This shocking Polaroid photo was very quickly brought to the authorities, and although roadblocks were set up as fast as possible, the alleged vehicle and the man in question were never caught. Examining the photo that was found, it's hard to exactly determine who these two people were because the tape on their faces. However, if we examine the young woman in the photo and place it side by side with the photo of Tara Calico, the similarities are certainly there. Her hair color, hairstyle, ears, nose, and eyes all seem to be the same between both of the photos. So although we can't say with 100% certainty that this is her, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. Another strange detail I noticed was the book that was laid off to the side of the woman, and a little digging revealed that it's a copy of a book called My Sweet Adrena by the author V.C. Andrews. Now, I've never read this book, nor have I heard of it prior to making this video, but reading the book's synopsis, it's about a young girl who lives in her family's secluded mansion and is haunted by the nightmares of the rape and death of her older sister. And with that being said, one has to beg the question, was this book placed here for some sort of strange or sick symbolism purpose? Was the abductor's goal to isolate Tara and lock her away somewhere for God knows what? We could continue on and on about the perverse nature of this person, but it's a small clue that I found to be somewhat overlooked, and extremely strange if it wasn't just a novel that was placed in someone's possession to read or pass time. Although that seems very unlikely considering both the young woman and boy were seemingly restrained in the photo, if not at all times. Authorities soon began to believe that the woman in the photo was indeed Tara as well, and the young boy was believed to be Michael Henley, a young man that had also vanished in New Mexico in 1988, just a few months prior to Tara. Upon a closer examination by authorities, it was found that the photo had been taken after May of 1989, due to the particular film in which the photograph was printed on. This type of Polaroid film was not available until after that time. Sadly, the boy in the photo was more than likely not Michael Henley because he had originally gone missing from his parents' campsite in New Mexico, and his remains were discovered roughly 7 miles in the mountains, just outside of where they were originally camped in 1990. This photo still would have predated the finding of his remains, however. The remains were also discovered 75 miles from where Tara Calico disappeared, and there's been much back and forth and conjecture revolving around the photo that was found in 1989, but it's become a general consensus that it was more than likely not Michael in the photo, but there is a high likelihood that it could have been Tara. Upon seeing the photo, Tara's mother, Patty, also believed it to be her daughter. She noted multiple characteristics that were very similar, and a particular scar that can be seen on the young woman's leg that also coincided with the prior injury that Tara had sustained. The photo was then widely disseminated by the media at the time, but Tara was never found. 20 years after the incident, another mystery began to unfold in regards to this photo. 2 additional photos were received in the mail by Port St. Joseph's police chief, David Barnes. One on June the 10th, and the other on August 10th of 2009, from Albuquerque, New Mexico. These photos depicted a little boy with sandy blonde hair. One photo showed the boy's face, and the other showed his face but with a black scribble over his mouth, as if the tape had been placed over it, like the photo in 1989. It was clear that whoever sent the photos was alluding to the fact that the boy in the original photo was indeed Michael Henley, and there was no return address on either of the letters. Although it couldn't be totally proven that the photos sent were indeed those of Michael Henley, it certainly stirred the cases of both Michael and Tara once again. Because if the individual who sent the letters was indeed the one who abducted Michael and Tara, then they indeed could have been the people seen in that disturbing photograph from 1989. These photos, like the original photo, were given to the FBI to assist in the ongoing investigation, in the hopes that fingerprints could possibly be obtained. But efforts were fruitless. More than 20 years after Tara Calico had disappeared that fateful day, new details began to emerge as to what really happened to her. Belen authorities received what they believed to be credible information on the fate of Tara in 2013. Allegedly, a man named Henry Brown gave a deathbed confession that he had been in the basement of a man named Lawrence Ramiro Jr. and noticed what appeared to be a young woman's body covered with a blue tarp and buried in a makeshift grave. The story goes that 3 boys that Tara had gone to high school with, Lawrence Ramiro Jr., Dave Silva, and Leroy Chavez, had been cruising that day in a truck and tried to get her attention while she was riding. They accidentally struck her with the vehicle, and amidst the panic, they picked her and her bicycle up and put them both in the back of the truck and ended up driving to a select location in the desert. From here, some or all of the individuals unfortunately sexually assaulted her. After the incident, Tara threatened to go to the police, and Ramiro proceeded to take out a pocket knife and stab her to death, while Leroy Chavez held her down. They originally hid her body in a nearby bush, but when extensive search efforts began, they then moved her body into Ramiro Jr.'s basement. Henry told investigators that they threatened to kill him if he went to the police, and he also alleged that the boys got away with the crime because Ramiro's father, Lawrence Ramiro Sr., was a prominent sheriff in the town at the time and helped cover up the crime for his son and his friends. He had also apparently found a letter of his son confessing his murder of Tara, and he burned it. After the searches began to die down, the boys then moved Tara's body to a nearby pond by one of their houses. Another man had also come forward and stated that another man involved had also confessed to him what happened, and it was a very similar story as well. Ramiro Jr. would later commit suicide in 1991, and despite the testimony of the witnesses, and since Tara's body has never been recovered, no charges were ever filed against the other suspects, or any at all for that matter. This case still remains actively open and has a dedicated 6-man task force on it with the FBI, and a $20,000 reward is being offered to anyone who can help solve this case. Sadly, Patty Dewell, Tara's mother, passed away in 2006 and would never again have the chance to see or find out what happened to her daughter. But Tara's sister has still not given up the search for her. Michelle Dewell and a high school friend of hers named Melinda Esquivel have made a variety of efforts to attempt to uncover new information in regards to what happened to Tara as recently as 2017, and continue to raise awareness of her and other missing persons on a regular basis. So what really happened to Tara Calico? It's hard to say exactly, but I personally believe there's some credence to the small town rumors and the deathbed confession that seem to confirm that those boys led to her demise. But considering no body was found, we can't say exactly what took place. But what do you think? Let me know any and all theories or thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like this video, subscribe with the bell, and share this video on social media. And if you also have any suggestions for cases I should cover, please leave those down in the comments as well. Anytime somebody goes missing, it's truly a sad moment, not only to see their flame of life extinguished, but the slow extinguishing of their families' lives is tough to see as well. I do, however, think despite the difficulty, that it's important to raise awareness of this case and thousands of other cases like it, because it just might save someone's life, and hopefully together we can find someone who's gone mysteriously missing. High school graduation is an achievement in the lives of many young people. The culmination of all the years spent in the educational system finally coming to a head. It's also oftentimes an opportunity to help you decide just what you want to do with your life and what doors you could open next, as one decides to enter the workforce or to pursue a higher education. However, for a young and aspiring medical student from Alabama, the door she opened would lead to her vanishing, never to be seen again. And what could only be described as a tale out of the nightmare of any parent, what was supposed to be an unforgettable trip to Aruba soon became unforgettable for other reasons. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Natalee Holloway. Natalee Ann Holloway was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi. She was the first of two children to be born to Dave and Elizabeth Holloway. Things were unfortunately not picture perfect, and by 1993, Natalee's parents divorced. Her and her brother Matthew would continue to be raised by their mother until she remarried in 2000 to a man by the name of George Jug Twitty, a prominent Alabama businessman. This marriage would lead to the entire family soon relocating to Alabama and settling in the town of Mountain Brook. Natalee was an exceptionally bright child and a straight-A student who also participated in multiple extracurricular activities. She was a member of the Honor Society and was on the school dance squad, to just name a few of them. Her hard work had paid off as she had earned a full-ride scholarship to the University of Alabama and was scheduled to pursue a pre-med track in college, a topic she had grown particularly fond of pursuing. However, Natalee would never get the chance to follow her bright future steps on the path to success. The following story is a timeline of events, and I'll do my best to explain them as they happened before we get into what possibly happened to Natalee following the details. May 28, 2005. Almost as quickly as the class of 2005 Mountain Brook High School had tossed their graduation caps, they were off to celebrate their achievement by taking a 5-day trip to Aruba, an island located in the Caribbean Sea. In total, 125 students, including Natalee, and 7 adult chaperones encompassed the group that made their way to the small tourist island for the celebration to begin. Their plane touched down on May 26, 2005, and the group settled into their arrangements at the Holiday Inn Resort near the northern end of the island. From here, the graduates began to celebrate in every sense of the word. The legal drinking age in Aruba is 18, and Natalee, along with her classmates, began to party it up. Witnesses would later state that Natalee, among many, had been binge drinking from dusk until dawn each day, and these witnesses would also state that Natalee was among some of the heaviest drinkers on the trip from their observations. On May 29th, Holloway would meet the man that would become synonymous with her disappearance, a young Dutch national who lived in the nearby town of Noord, known by the name of Joran van der Sloot. She meets him at the hotel casino located at the Holiday Inn in which her party is staying, and the two hit things off, and Joran is invited to join Natalie as they plan their evening festivities. This is the last footage of Natalie Holloway. From here, van der Sloot and his two friends, known as Deepak and Satish Kalpoe, join Natalie and her friends at a popular bar known as Carlos and Charlie's in downtown Oranjestad. Joran and Natalie are seen flirting, drinking, and dancing together. And shortly after the bar closes at 1 a.m., Holloway is seen leaving in the car with Joran van der Sloot, Deepak Kalpoe, and Satish Kalpoe. The last word she would tell her friends upon her departure would be Aruba, and afterwards she entered the vehicle with the men and was never seen again. The following morning on May the 30th, Natalie's friends were unable to find her in their hotel. They noticed that her bags along with her passport and other belongings remained untouched in her room. After an extensive search both inside and outside of the hotel, with both students and chaperones looking, Natalie was nowhere to be found. As the class was set to depart, a chaperone relays the news to Holloway's mother, Beth, and the class then takes off for home. Later that night, Beth and her husband, Natalie's stepfather, as well as several family and friends arrive in Aruba on a private rented jet to begin searching for her. They begin their search at the Holiday Inn in which the students were staying at, and after getting a lead from one of the people at the front desk, they made their way to Carlos and Charlie's, where eventually information gathering leads them to van der Sloot's home in Noord. Joran is questioned and admits that he left the bar with Natalie and the Kalpoe brothers, and from here they drove to a lighthouse overlooking the ocean. Afterwards, he claimed, they dropped her back off at the Holiday Inn. Joran then guides the group back to the hotel, where he promised to point out the security guard which allegedly helped her inside. But after some time, he is unable to find the guard. Now even more distraught, Natalie's parents contact the local police. June 1st of 2005. With Natalie not officially determined to be a missing person yet, a group of approximately 100 tourists, various locals, and the police begin searching for her. This search would expand to include a volunteer team from Texas who was flown in, as well as a team of Dutch Marines and 3 F-16 fighter jets from the Netherlands, all of which are unable to discover any signs of Holloway anywhere. June 5th of 2005. The first suspects are detained. The authorities detain former security guards at the property as well. Van der Sloot's father, Paulus, and a DJ that was present on a party boat in which Natalie was in contact with were also detained, all of which would be released just 8 days later. And on June 9th of 2005, under pressure from Natalie's family and government officials, Deputy Police Chief Gerald Dompig arrests Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers. From here, some of the suspects seem to change their story. The Kalpoe brothers first said that they had dropped Natalie back off at the Holiday Inn, but they were now saying that they had dropped Joran and Natalie off at the beach, located near the hotel. Van der Sloot would confirm these details upon re-questioning, but claimed that he simply let Natalie walk back to her hotel. And clearly, things were not adding up. As we enter July of 2005, the search continues, and a judge orders the Kalpoe brothers to be set free, but that Joran will be detained for another 60 days, with no reason given. At first, strands of hair on duct tape were discovered on the northeast coast of Aruba, and were quickly sent to the FBI crime lab in Quantico, Virginia. Many thought that this could potentially be a break in the case, but sadly, the results would be determined to be a negative match in regards to Holloway. Later this month, authorities would also drain a pond located near the adjacent Marriott resort. On the tip from a local gardener who claimed to have seen Vandersloot and the Calpo brothers digging next to it the night of Natalie's disappearance. However, just 4 days later, their efforts turned up nothing. Heading into September, Vandersloot is released on the condition that he remain available to the police as the investigation continues. And from here, things go fairly radio silent for a decent chunk of time, with no new leads or evidence. And this was until March of 2006. In a lengthy interview with Greta von Susteren that aired over the course of 3 nights, Joran Vandersloot recounted details of his time with Natalie that fateful night, from drinking at the bar to leaving her on the beach. And it was during this interview that he also addressed some previously unknown elements of the case to the public, such as why his shoes went missing the night of her disappearance. And after this interview, again things go radio silent for another year. On November 21st of 2007, Joran and the Calpo brothers are arrested again, but this time in the Netherlands, where they attend school. The suspects were arrested on what appeared to be new and incriminating evidence. However, after several weeks of incarceration, the 3 men are let go, yet again. For what seemed to be a lost cause at this point, no new evidence or details would emerge for yet another year. And this was until there was a breakthrough spearheaded by a Dutch reporter named Peter de Vries. Vandersloot had been led to a vehicle that had been out years later. Seemingly out of the blue, Natalie's stepfather's lawyer, a man by the name of John Kelly, received an email from Vandersloot, who was offering to reveal the location of Holloway's body in exchange for $25,000 up front and another $225,000 when her body was found. Kelly agrees to the arrangement, but quickly relays the information to the FBI. Kelly, under the advisement of the FBI, takes $10,000 in cash to a meeting with Vandersloot in Aruba. The meeting leads to a house where Joran says that his father buried Holloway under the home's foundation, a far departure from she was dumped into the ocean. As the investigation began to dig deeper with these new details, Vandersloot would disappear and covertly travel to Peru to attend a poker tournament. He would also email Kelly again and admit that the whole thing was a ruse. While he was in Peru, 5 years after Natalie Holloway's disappearance, Vandersloot would murder a woman by the name of Stephanie Ramirez in his hotel room in Lima. Her body would not initially be discovered since Joran had left instructions for the staff to not enter his room, and these requests were initially honored. From here, he made a run for it, but was eventually found in a taxi near the coastal city of Vina del Mar in Chile. He was taken back to Lima and was placed under high security incarceration within a Peruvian prison. Just several weeks after his apprehension in Peru, he would then be charged with several indictments in the United States for wire fraud and extortion in regards to his dealings with Kelly, Holloway's stepfather's lawyer. After spending several years in prison and on trial, Vandersloot finally pled guilty to the murder and is sentenced to 28 years in prison. He is also ordered to pay $75,000 in reparations to the victim's family. Just 1 day prior to these charges, Natalie Holloway was legally declared dead by an Alabama judge. Beth, her mother, had no proof or indication that her daughter was still alive, but still wanted to continue to hang on to a slight glimmer of hope that one day her daughter would be found. The following day after Vandersloot's sentencing, Natalie's family commented that they hoped that he would soon face justice for what he did to Natalie, but disappointingly, they would learn that it would be a minimum of a quarter of a century until such an extradition would be possible. And without any sign of physical evidence, the chances of him being charged with her murder were still slim to none. This is the timeline of events surrounding the disappearance of Natalie Holloway. She was never found, and due to the conflicting stories from the suspects themselves and the lack of physical evidence, it's extremely difficult for us to try and figure out exactly what could have happened to her. However, there are multiple theories as to what could have happened, and out of those, I've chosen several that I find to be the most probable, and I will now do my best to examine and break them down for you. As the years have passed since her initial disappearance, there have been many theories as to what could have happened to Natalee Holloway. This theory begins with 3 fishermen who were present at the exact same spot at the exact time that Joran Vandersloot said he and Natalee were together on the beach the night she disappeared. Their statement is as follows: "We arrived just after midnight at the fisherman's hut and stayed until 4:30 a.m. If someone says he came there with a girl, he's definitely telling lies. It would have been impossible that they were there without us seeing them, unless all 3 of us were blind and deaf." This statement would also later be corroborated by members of the Dutch cold case team. They stated that their investigation had indicated that Joran's statement that he left Natalee on the beach near the fisherman's hut was simply another concocted story by the suspect. But if Vandersloot and Natalee had not been on the beach, then where could they have gone? In his various interviews, Vandersloot gave authorities several clues. One statement they believed could be true from him was that he stated that he and the Kalpoe brothers had driven to his apartment and arrived at approximately 1:40 a.m. with Natalee. His intention was to have sex with her and then call a taxi to take her back to the hotel afterwards. During other interviews with Joran's associates and friends, a friend by the name of Freddie stated that Vandersloot's typical behavior during that time was to pick up girls at Carlos and Charlie's, have sex with them, either at a hotel or his apartment, and then get them to leave, then start all over again with a new girl as soon as possible. They referred to each other as the pimps. It would seem under further analysis that Vandersloot was not the only one involved in this behavior, but rather it was a concerted effort by the friend group to identify potential girls, entice them back to the hotel room, party with them, then engage in sex with them, and film the escapades for later enjoyment. But it wasn't just them who were going to be enjoying the videos and pictures, but rather Vandersloot had an entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to develop something similar to Girls Gone Wild, and to profit off of his predatory exploits of women, with or without their consent. There is actually evidence of this according to the FBI. The films themselves were never found, but were mentioned a multitude of times in seized conversations and data from Vandersloot, but that it was speculated that the films could have been transferred to someone who could potentially profit from them and hold a partial amount of assets for Vandersloot to access at a later time. A man who was a resident of Miami, Florida, who lived in Aruba during that time of Holloway's disappearance, went by the alias Mr. Pink, and owned and operated a front company in Aruba, one where he would lure women both on the island and from outside the island to star in exploitative sexual films under the guise of a potential modeling career for them. He soon became a possible suspect or link within the situation. However, after phone taps and other investigative techniques, no definitive link between Joran and Mr. Pink was ever proven. But the perspective did spawn the pimp theory that perhaps Natalee, among many other women, was lured to potentially be exploited, and that either before or after any relations, something went terribly wrong, and she was ultimately disposed of, as to not expose the operation. Hidden within the police files of the Holloway case, there is another theory that was investigated as a possible explanation to her disappearance. It focuses on a man by the name of Steve, whose stage name at the time was known as DJ Diablo, who was a regular performer on the party boat on Aruba, known as the Tattoo. Just 1 week after Natalee's disappearance, Steve stepped forward as a voluntary witness. He claimed that he had witnessed Natalee brought back to the Holiday Inn, just as Vandersloot and the Kalpoe brothers had originally explained. However, security camera footage from the Holiday Inn lobby would later prove that to be a lie, because Natalee was never spotted entering the lobby that night. Steve, when questioned about where he was during the hours of 1 and 6 a.m. the night of Natalie's disappearance, claimed that he had been working on the tattoo. However, when the owner of the boat was contacted to verify these claims, he confirmed that Steve had indeed not been working that night. So where could he have been? Could it be possible that he provided Vandersloot and the Calpo brothers with the boat that they then used to dispose of Natalie's body? Once his details could not be confirmed, he was arrested for giving a false statement to law enforcement and was further interrogated, where his story not only changed multiple times, but other lies were seemingly exposed. He claimed that at approximately 11:30 p.m. that night, he had gone to the bar with a friend called Choose Your Name, and that he didn't frequent and he certainly didn't go to Carlos and Charlie's that night. However, the staff and multiple witnesses from Carlos and Charlie's would have a very different story. Here, he could be seen partying it up at Carlos and Charlie's, the exact same bar where Vandersloot, the Calpo brothers, and Natalie's party had been. After agreeing that he had not worked that night on the tattoo, he said he partied until approximately 4 a.m., where he then went and fell asleep on the tattoo to end his night. But all the bars closed at 1 a.m., and even if we gave him the leeway until 2 a.m. to get to where he was going to spend the rest of his night, that still leaves us with a deficit of 2 hours. So where was Steve between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. the night Natalie disappeared? Authorities would later determine that he not only had access to a boat, but one of the most simple explanations to what could have happened to her body was that she was wrapped up, drove a mile or two out to sea, and then released into the water. The next stop with the current would have approximately been the Panama Canal. However, due to a lack of evidence, Steve would be released just 2 weeks later, and despite the inconsistencies in his story, he would return to work as a DJ as if nothing ever happened, and wouldn't further be involved in the investigation. Given everything I've learned about this case, this is what I think happened. I think it's certainly possible that the original plan was for Vandersloot to hook up with Natalie, and really nothing more. But one thing led to another, and either she refused, or was killed somehow, or accidentally passed. Something definitely happened to her, for sure, which the latter seems more than likely. Vandersloot and his friends panicked, where they possibly got in touch with Steve and used his boat to dispose of her body further out in the ocean. It would account for the lack of a body and physical evidence, and the conflicting and changing stories and the DJ being involved despite the lack of evidence. It's like he was covering for them in order to ward any suspicion off of himself. Another factor as to why none of the charges stuck was the mishandling of crucial information in the investigation. There is a plethora of enigmas in regards to the Natalie Holloway case, such as her hotel door being opened 3 times during the night she disappeared, with her magnetic key, as registered by the hotel's card reader computer. And these times were between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., the exact window of time in which she was believed to have disappeared in. And an explanation was never found. Perhaps whoever was responsible for Natalie's disappearance made their way back to the room in search of anything of value. But that wouldn't explain much for us, unfortunately, because none of her belongings, including her passport and money, were found to be missing. The only other plausible explanation would be that Natalie had switched cards with one of her roommates earlier in the night, since the girls had been sharing a room. This would also account for her belongings still being there. However, Natalie's roommates were never questioned by the Aruban police or the FBI, when in reality, this seemingly crucial piece of potential evidence should have been brought to light as soon as it was realized. And if this was the case, then it certainly is an incredibly bad piece of police work in my opinion. It was also later discovered that the Aruban police didn't secure surveillance tapes until 3 weeks into the investigation. This includes the hotel lobby surveillance footage, along with nearby gas station and restaurant tapes, most of which, the exception of 1 or 2 places, the hotel lobby included, had all but been erased. It seems that at the time, local authorities had their suspects in custody and were confident that they had already solved their case, except when reality came knocking, they needed more evidence to prove their claims, and it came back to bite them, and nothing stuck. So in conclusion, what started out as a celebration shortly ended in a tragic mystery. Natalee Holloway was never found, and the truth is that we may never know what happened to her, if she perished by accident or malicious intent, or if she somehow ended up somewhere else and is somehow still with us. Joran Vandersloot is currently serving his 28-year prison sentence, and the Calpo brothers still continue to live and work in Aruba, as does Steve the DJ. Beth Holloway, Natalee's mother, became a motivational speaker on the topic of personal safety and founded both the International Safe Travels Foundation in an effort to educate the public to travel more safely, as well as the Natalee Holloway Resource Center, which aids families in search for their missing loved ones. As with all missing person cases, I particularly feel for her and her family having to endure a life without her. And I hope that one day someone comes forward and can tell us what truly happened to her beyond the shadow of a doubt, and that one day she won't be classified as mysteriously missing. Thank you guys so much for watching the latest episode. Please hit the like button, subscribe with the bell so that you never miss new content, and share this video on social media to help us grow. And until next time, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe and take care. Speaking from experience, when COVID initially hit the world, it caused many of us, most of us, to experience a great deal of anxiety at the uncertainty of our situation. This anxiety affected people in many different ways, and when people are isolated and cut off from the world, there's no telling just what anguish it can cause them. This is the story about a girl that seemed to have her whole life ahead of her, who disappeared one foggy morning in San Francisco. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Sydney West. Sydney West was born to her excited parents, Jay and Kimberly West, on July 11th, 2001. The family originally grew to include a younger sister to Sydney and lived in Pleasanton, California for the majority of Sydney's life, before the family decided to relocate to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, towards the end of the year in 2010. Sydney was always described as a bright and energetic soul by her family and friends. She was a sweet and goofy girl who wasn't afraid to be herself and let her true colors show. Those who knew her enjoyed her company immensely, and many would describe that she made their lives brighter as a result of her presence. She was also known for being highly intelligent, well-spoken, and had a deep love for the environment. So much so that she convinced her mother to start composting. This love for the environment also included love for animals and time spent outdoors. Living a very active lifestyle, one of Sydney's passions was volleyball. While she attended Foothill High School in Chapel Hill, she would become the school's varsity co-captain for her team, and this love for the sport led to her transitioning to playing beach volleyball in 2019 and 2020. Along with sports, Sydney was also interested in the arts. While she enjoyed writing and drawing, her favorite form of expression was music. She soon became a regular at many open mic nights and would write, record, and perform her own music. She also enjoyed this activity with her father, Jay. Sydney may have appeared to be on top of the world on the outside, on the inside, she was struggling with mental health. After graduating in 2019, she took a year off, where, according to blog posts written by her, she began to experience varying bouts of depression, as well as anxiety. These feelings were seemingly compounded when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Although her anxiety and uncertainty were worse than they had ever been, a bright future still seemed ahead for the young Sydney. This dark cloud that had plagued her had seemingly been lifted when Sydney got the news that she had been accepted into her dream school of UC Berkeley. Although it was a long and difficult day for both her and her parents, as described by her parents in a later interview, she was extremely excited to start this new chapter in her life. So in August of 2020, Sydney moved back to California and began taking classes at UC Berkeley. Her family helped her move into her dorm, and although she hadn't declared a major, she showed a strong interest in medicine, business, and biological sciences. She also joined the school's rowing team, which would have made a great marriage of her love of the environment with her active lifestyle. Although things seemingly were going great, due to the pandemic, all of Sydney's classes were online, an adjustment that her and many students were finding incredibly difficult to deal with. Sydney had also suffered a concussion just a few months prior to school starting that she was still recovering from. The combination of these factors led to a perfect storm, and Sydney couldn't seemingly make it work anymore. She had decided that she had to take a break from school in order to recover, and ended up moving out of her dorm and in with some friends she had in the Bay Area. On September 29th of 2020, Sydney had an hour-long phone call with her dad, Jay, and Jay expected to hear from his daughter the following day. However, little did he know that this call wouldn't come, and this call would be the last time he would ever speak to his little girl. The following day, September 30th, it was a foggy morning in San Francisco, and Sydney booked a one-way ride using a share riding service to the Golden Gate Bridge. She was last seen at approximately 6:45 a.m. that day. After not receiving the phone call he had expected, her father Jay began to worry because this was not like Sydney at all. After several attempted phone calls, Jay then also used an app to attempt to locate his daughter's phone, but was unsuccessful. He then contacted the friend that she lived with, and she didn't know where Sydney was either. The worry soon turned into panic as her parents checked her bank account and social media accounts, none of which had any activity. This prompted her parents to file a missing person report in North Carolina, as this is the protocol when someone's permanent address is in another state. And that report was immediately transferred to the authorities in San Francisco, where a subsequent report was filed there as well. Sydney has never been seen again. The driver for the share service was interviewed, among many others, and was fully cooperative and has since been cleared as a suspect. All available surveillance footage of the bridge and surrounding areas has been reviewed, but due to the heavy fog in the area at the time, all has been inconclusive as to where Sydney went. And in conjunction with a lack of activity on all social media and bank accounts, the majority of her personal belongings were still at her residence with her friends in the Bay Area, everything except for a backpack of her usual day-to-day items. This backpack was later found in the area around the Golden Gate Bridge, and fortunately was quickly turned over to the SFPD and was later returned to her family. This mysterious disappearance leaves us with a plethora of questions, many of which I will attempt to answer and speculate on now. And that is indeed what this is, speculation. So please, take everything I say with a grain of salt. Why was Sydney at the Golden Gate Bridge? According to her friends and family, this location was not at all out of the ordinary for her. She frequently would take pictures there, as well as walk or run for daily exercise. But the Golden Gate Bridge is also notorious for another reason. It is often the site of suicide. Between 40 to 100 people jump to their deaths at the bridge every year. And given that she took a one-way ride to the bridge using a share ride service and had a past of struggling with mental health issues, compounded by COVID isolation and anxiety, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that she may have jumped to her death off the bridge. However, there is no evidence to support this besides the lack of activity and her bag being found in the area. As far as we know, no note was ever found. No additional or outside motivations were discovered. Sydney hadn't been in a relationship that had gone south recently, or that she hadn't been on any substances that could have caused any additional turmoil. But sometimes those things aren't always factors, and we never know what's going on in someone's head. And due to the footage being obstructed, we may never know if this is what truly happened to her. Another possibility is also a terrible one. According to the state of California's human trafficking statistics, in 2018, 1,656 cases were reported in the state. Those are, of course, only the ones that were reported. One is too many. Given the area where the Golden Gate Bridge is located in San Francisco, it's not considered the best place to be, especially as a young woman. It is certainly also not out of the realm of possibility that the poor girl was abducted and trafficked, although I pray that that's not the case either. These are just several possibilities as to what could have happened to Sydney West. And although I pray that her family finds her alive somewhere somehow, or at the very least they get some sort of closure to end their suffering. Sydney's information has been entered into the National Crime Information Center database and is currently being handled by the Missing Persons section of the Special Victims Unit. There have been dozens of leads, but the authorities are remaining tight-lipped, other than stating that they don't believe that there was any evidence of foul play, and that they consider that Sydney may have been an at-risk person given her history of depression and anxiety. Sydney's friends and parents continue their efforts to find her as well. They regularly update a Facebook page called Find Sydney West, which I will be linking below if you'd like to follow the case further. They also operate a website called FindSydneyWest.com, which has provided many of the details I've cited in this video, along with additional information. Sydney was last seen on September 20th, 2020, near the Golden Gate Bridge. She was wearing long dark leggings, a teal hoodie sweatshirt, Vans slip-on sneakers with a blue and green tropical print on them. Her hair was in a bun, and she was carrying a black backpack. If you have any information that could help find Sydney West, please contact the family's private investigator, Scott Dudick, at phone number 925-705-8328, or email him at dudick.associates@gmail.com. There is a $25,000 reward being offered for information leading to her location and return. I do have to say that this case in particular is especially sad for me and really hits home. I also suffer from anxiety and depression, and I recently lost a friend to suicide. And I just want to say that I pray that her family either finds her or gets closure. Now, hopefully Sydney will no longer be mysteriously missing. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a good while since I've made a video due to my schedule being extremely busy the last month or so. So if you are here and you did watch, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you are new here. And just know that I truly appreciate you guys taking the time. As always, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives, and take care. Some of us live for adventure. The spark to experience something new and exciting. But the sense of wonder that drives our hunger for such actions doesn't always lead us to make the best decisions throughout our lives. Some of those decisions can end in tragedy. This is the story of a young woman who craved adventure and spiritual connection, but one decision would ultimately lead her to never being seen again. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Maureen Kelly. Maureen Lanua Kelly was born on September 26th of 1993 in Vancouver, Washington. She was raised by her mother, Mapuana, and was always described as an adventurous child. Known by her nickname Anu to her friends, she graduated from Lewis and Clark High School and was an aspiring singer and songwriter, often posting ukulele videos on her YouTube channel. According to her friends, Anu had longed for a spiritual connection, something most of us often want or require in life, and she often discussed going on a spiritual quest in the woods to find herself. So when the friend group decided to plan a camping trip to Gifford-Pinchot National Park near Mount St. Helens, Anu was all but eager to join them. The group arrived on June 9th of 2013 and set up at a campground located within the national forest. According to her friends, Anu decided that she was going to indeed embark on that spiritual journey she had been longing for so long, and decided that in order to make this happen, she needed to be in her most natural state of being. Anu then stripped naked, and wearing only a fanny pack containing knives, a book of matches, and a compass, she set off into the great unknown. She unfortunately did not inform the group of where she intended to go. Thinking Anu would return by sundown, excited to tell them all about her journey and awakening, her friends thought nothing of this. But when the sun went down, and Anu was nowhere to be found, those cheerful attitudes soon shifted to feelings of worry and guilt. After searching as much as they could on foot, the group decided that they would report her missing, and shortly after midnight in the early morning hours of Monday, June the 10th of 2013. That's exactly what they did. Authorities promptly initiated a search for the young woman, and were immediately concerned because she had left without clothes, shoes, food, or water, and had already been missing for hours prior to the search being arranged. Rescue coordinators combed the forest of the park, but despite their best efforts, it was like Anu had vanished into thin air, because no traces of her were found. This was until canine sniffer units were brought in and seemed to have a strong scent trail to follow. Their trail led to the discovery of footprints that matched Anu's description, heading north from the camp and towards Service Road 54. But unfortunately, the scent was lost, and Anu was never seen again. All of her friends and acquaintances were subsequently interviewed, and all were exonerated of any foul play. When anyone, especially someone this young, goes missing like this, it always leaves us with more questions than answers. In this segment, I will do my best to speculate on what could have happened to Maureen Kelly, and since we have no definitive answers, this is indeed just speculation, so please keep that in mind. Although through my research I was unable to confirm these details, it is my speculation that drugs could have possibly been involved. Getting familiar with the case, Anu seemed to be a free-spirited kind of person, and often self-described herself as a hippie. And although these details themselves aren't indicative of drug use, unless someone truly felt the overwhelming spiritual need to remove all of their clothes and go exploring in an unknown forest, it seems like drug use could have been at play. That whatever substance she could have consumed might have lowered her inhibitions to where this sounded like a good idea. This could have also explained why her friends didn't seem to have an issue with her leaving in this state as well. And if she was intoxicated, this could have certainly contributed to her becoming lost. It also doesn't make any sense to me as to why she would set off in such a state right before nightfall as well, unless some kind of substance was indeed involved. Regardless if that was the case or not, as far as what could have happened to her while she was lost is an even bigger mystery. It was reported by the authorities that temperatures over the next several nights dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to induce hypothermia without clothes or shelter in most people. So if the elements didn't take her, a wild animal certainly could have. Bears and other animals are common in the forest in which Anu found herself, and if she would have been injured or caught off guard, she could have been an easy target, although there is no evidence to prove this theory either. My last bit of speculation is that her footprints were found by the canine units leading towards a road within the park. It could certainly be possible that Anu could have been hit by a vehicle, or she could have taken a ride from someone, which leads us into a whole other realm of speculation and horrifying possibilities. Although, as stated before, no physical evidence of her was ever found. Although I pray that she is found alive, she's just a few months away from being missing for 9 years. I hope more eyes on the case could potentially give us additional details, so that Maureen Anu Kelly will no longer be mysteriously missing. She's described as an Asian Pacific Islander with black hair, approximately 5 foot 7 inches tall, and weighing 150 to 160 pounds. Anyone with any information that can help solve this case is asked to contact the Chickahominy County Sheriff's Office at 509-427-9490, referencing her case number, which is 13-04081. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Mysteriously Missing. This case is certainly a sad and an interesting one for sure, and I look forward to reading your comments below. As always, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe with the bell if you are new here, so you never miss a new episode. And as always, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care. When your loved ones walk out the door each day to go about their normal day, we often take this for granted. We oftentimes don't think or realize that this could be the last and final time we ever get to see them. This is especially true if we have an argument with someone we love, when our emotions tend to get the best of us, not knowing that a fight could be the final memory we have about someone that we care about. This realization became all too real for one family among many. This is the story of a man who seemingly vanished into thin air one warm Nebraska night. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Chance Engelbert. Family outings are typically among some of the funnest times one can have. We often find ourselves making memories that will last a lifetime. However, on this particular outing, happiness was not how things would end. Chance Engelbert, his wife Bailey, and their young son were visiting Bailey's family in the small town of Gering, Nebraska, this warm summer's day. Recently unemployed after being laid off at his coal mining job in Wyoming, Chance had just received a new financial opportunity to provide for his family at a propane company. What started as a nice outing playing golf as a family soon escalated to a fight. At some point, comments were made by one or both of Bailey's parents regarding Chance's new job. They believed that he wouldn't be able to adequately provide for the young family, and questioned if he had truly been laid off from his coal mining job. An upset Chance opted to leave the gathering, and soon his wife Bailey was driving him and their young son to her grandparents' home, also located in Gering. Discussing what had just transpired only continued to anger Chance. He asked to be driven back to Wyoming, but when Bailey refused, Chance only grew more upset. And shortly after arriving in the driveway of Bailey's grandparents' home, he left the family vehicle and began walking towards Wyoming, with only his clothes, wallet, and cell phone on him. Little did Bailey know that this would be the last time she would see her husband. Chance then made a phone call to his best friend, Matt Miller, but sadly Miller was unable to help Chance with a ride. So Chance then planned to walk from Gering, Nebraska, to Torrington, Wyoming, a trip that would have taken approximately 11 and a half hours on foot. Bailey last spoke to Chance at 7:46 p.m., and he told her that he was walking south. But when later questioned, Matt Miller stated that when he spoke to Chance, he had told him that he was walking north. At 9:08 p.m., Chance's phone would send a final text message to his aunt, which was described as a random string of emojis and numbers, not making any logical sense. Between the time he disappeared and his final text, a powerful storm had rolled through the area, bringing torrential downpours and possible tornadic weather. Bailey and her family contacted any and all of Chance's friends in an effort to have them reach out to him, as they themselves continued to reach out in an effort to get him to come back. As the storm hit, the family hoped and assumed that Chance had found shelter and would be contacting them soon. However, when hours passed and no word from Chance materialized, they truly began to worry. Bailey's grandfather went out searching for him in his truck, but it was to no avail. Praying that her husband would come to his senses and make his way back to the family's home, Bailey went to sleep for the night. But when she woke up the following morning, and Chance still hadn't been seen or heard from, she began to panic. She contacted Chance's family, who quickly reported him missing. During the subsequent investigation, it was found that Chance's phone had been turned off at approximately 9:08 p.m., right after sending that final encrypted text message. His phone was also last pinged off a tower located near County Road 19, near Scottsbluff, Nebraska. They also would discover CCTV footage of Chance walking alone through an intersection shortly after this time, and this would be the last time Chance would ever be seen. The Gering Police Department, upon beginning their investigation, called in the help of 18 agencies and utilized the use of drones, divers, sniffer dogs, horseback riders, and 147 volunteers, all of which managed to cover 2,400 acres of land on foot in search of Chance. The Nebraska State Patrol helicopter team managed to cover an additional 380 miles during their search as well, but all efforts failed to find a single sign of Chance. Although no signs were discovered, the official investigation did yield speculation as to what could have possibly happened. The weather the night Chance disappeared was described as heavy and cold rain. If someone were to be exposed to such temperatures for a prolonged period of time without adequate clothing or shelter, they could eventually have succumbed to hypothermia, and it is speculated that Chance could have fallen or wandered into a river or stream, although no evidence exists to prove this speculation. In this segment, I'll do my best to cover additional speculation as to what could have happened to Chance Engelbert, and what I possibly think happened to him as well. And as always, all of this is just speculation, so please take all of the following theories with a grain of salt. The theory that Chance could have fallen into a river or stream is certainly a plausible one. Walking the country roads of Nebraska, this wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. However, for a man that was described as a true cowboy at heart by his friends and family, and one that grew up not only experiencing and loving the outdoors, but also experiencing all kinds of extreme weather, this theory seems fairly unlikely to me. Someone with that kind of experience surely would have sought shelter after realizing the weather they found themselves in. And although the weather was warm previously in the day, it seems that a cold front had come in, not only creating the storm, but adding to the temperature drop and the temperature of the rain. But it would take a good amount of time for someone to experience hypothermia just from the rain, unless he did fall into a river or stream. Which again, I think it's probable, but it's somewhat unlikely. Although besides his phone, which more than likely had a flashlight built into it, he didn't have any other survival belongings on him that we were aware of at the time. From here, this leaves us with roughly 3 other possibilities. The next being that Chance could have taken his own life. Although this is an uncomfortable subject, it's a very real possibility for a variety of people to want to end their life due to persistent hardship A young father, just 25 years old, who was not only bearing the responsibility as the provider in his family, but also just having lost the ability to provide, certainly would have worn on the poor man. And although he had a new job lined up, it apparently wasn't as financially rewarding, or so according to his in-laws. The stress of this, and probably other things that we can't possibly be aware of, could have broke Chance, and he could have taken his own life. Although I truly hope that that isn't the case. But if Chance didn't take his life, this leaves us with two remaining theories. The next is that Chance could have been the victim of criminal activity. There's two reasons I believe that this could be a possibility. Chance was looking for a ride back to Wyoming, and we don't know if he was carrying any money or debit or credit cards at the time of his departure. If he was hitchhiking, this could have prompted someone with the worst intentions to prey upon him. And another strange aspect to this case that could potentially back this up is the fact that the message he sent to his aunt was just garbled emojis and numbers. And according to his family, Chance didn't use emojis. So this in and of itself is strange, but it's not a smoking gun. The last and final theory that has been speculated upon is that Bailey and or her family was involved in his disappearance. And although I find this really unlikely, and I wish no harm to anyone in presenting this theory, since it's been speculated on, I just think we should discuss it. It was reported that fairly early on in the investigation, Bailey asked for an official death certificate. While this typically would be a major red flag given the circumstances, I can't really blame her. Chance was the sole breadwinner of the household, and any insurance he may or may not have had, or social security benefits, couldn't be obtained without that certificate. And considering the young family probably didn't have a lot of money in savings due to finances clearly being an issue with Bailey's family bringing it up, and given the fact that she had a young son to care for as well, if I was in her shoes, I would have thought the same thing, with the situation beginning to look very bleak. Now, aside from this, Bailey and her family have actually been regarded as very cooperative in the investigation, as well as when they've been contacted by the media. And although the case continues to receive multiple tips frequently, a single person of interest has not yet been discovered. There have been skeletal remains that have been found in the last couple months, but releases on information in regards to this case has not yet happened. Chance Engelbert was last seen walking away from the residence in Gering, Nebraska around 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, July the 6th, 2019. He's described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes, age 25, and standing at 5 feet 9 inches tall. He was last seen wearing a button-up Wrangler shirt, dark blue jeans, and a black and white trucker hat. If you have any information, please contact 308-436-5089 or any of the other numbers listed here on screen now. Chance's family continues to seek answers and regularly run a Facebook page where they post updates on the case. If you'd like to follow that page, you can find it at facebook.com/findChanceEngelbert. My thoughts and prayers go out to Chance and his family. I pray that one day that they find some answers, and that Chance will no longer be mysteriously missing. Please do me a favor and share this video as well as any of the other videos I've made on multiple cases so that we can get more eyes on these stories like this one. And hopefully somebody somewhere can help solve one of these cases, and someone's family can finally have some peace. And with that being said, please leave a comment with your thoughts down below, and please do me another favor, subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button because it really helps the algorithm push this video out to a bigger potential audience. And not only will this help get more eyes on the case, but other cases I've covered as well. And until next time, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care. The mystery of a missing person is enough to make us ponder and wonder just exactly what happened to them. It is oftentimes far more tragic when a child goes missing, because they have their whole lives ahead of them, not yet having a chance to grow up, discover the world, and experience all the wonders it has to offer. It is especially sad when the missing child is found deceased. However, in this particular case, there is a silver lining. This is the story of a young girl who went missing and was found in the desert in Arizona, and her story would spark the beginning of a 60-year-long cold case that thawed and was solved just recently. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Sharon Lee Gallegos, also known as Little Miss Nobody. July 31st, 1960, in Yavapai County, Arizona. A school teacher was on a walk in the hot Arizona desert. He was surveying the land for noteworthy rocks that he could take back home with him when he made a startling discovery. Tucked away in the sandy terrain was the half-exposed body of a little girl. She was partially decomposed and dressed in white shorts, a checkered blouse, and had on adult-sized flip-flops that had seemingly been cut to fit her small feet. Her little finger and toenails were painted red. The school teacher, absolutely aghast at what he had just found, immediately reported the girl to the authorities. It would be discovered that the young girl's body had been set on fire, and that she was more than likely sexually assaulted. Baffled at the discovery, authorities quickly began a homicide investigation. With the active assistance of local media and volunteers, a broadcast bulletin was put out in an effort to discover the child's identity and gain further details to build the case. Initial speculation led authorities to believe that the child could have been a member of a family of transients. The police questioned a man by the name of Lester Davidson and 2 of his 4 children. Davidson and his family were well known for hitchhiking in the area during that time, but after several hours of questioning, it was discovered that this child had no connection to the Davidsons. Soon unsuccessful in their efforts to figure out just who this young girl was, what happened to her, and who were the perpetrators, and due to the nature of the state she was found in and the lack of forensic technology at the time, the little girl would go without a name for more than 60 years. And due to the authorities being able to identify her, she was given the placeholder name of Little Miss Nobody. After all efforts had seemingly been exhausted, a funeral was arranged for Little Miss Nobody and took place on August 10th of 1960. She was laid to rest in Mountain View Cemetery, with campaign funds raised to pay for her burial and headstone. The funeral service was conducted by Dr. Charles Parker at the Congregational Church in Prescott, Arizona, and had over 70 attendees. At this service, a placard was placed upon Little Miss Nobody's pale blue casket that read, "God's little child, date of birth unknown, date of death unknown." During the eulogy, Dr. Parker recited a poem entitled "For a Little Girl Unknown," before addressing those in attendance with a speech in which he stated, "Here's a little wanderer who has been in our midst. We don't know her name, and we can only guess her age. It occurs to me that we may not know, but God knows. There are no unknowns, no orphans in God's world. She doesn't need a name today. She has the name of an angel somewhere in eternity. And we may never know the whys and wherefores, but somewhere, someone is going to be watching the paper to learn what happened to this little girl left in the desert. If there has been a misdeed, probably a disquieted consciousness will go on and on." Her tombstone was then inscribed with a quote from St. Matthew, which reads, "Blessed are the pure in heart." After her burial, efforts in her case soon ebbed away due to the lack of details and new evidence, and the case went from cold to frozen, with many believing that this sad situation would never see justice. And this was until 2018. Since 1960, many advancements in DNA profiling technology have now come into reality. A renewed interest in the case soon captivated the public's attention, and with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children offering to pay for the exhumation and required testing, a decision was made to reopen the case and exhume the young girl's body in an effort to solve the case once and for all. Samples of the girl's DNA were successfully collected and were entered both into the National Missing and Identified Persons System and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children databases for comparison to cases nationwide. At first, these new efforts were fruitless, but in January of 2022, with further advances in forensic technology, a sample of the girl's DNA was sent to Ortham Inc. in efforts that a genealogical match would identify a close relative to help establish her identity. These efforts would finally solve the mystery of the little girl's identity after so many years of trying. On March 15th, 2022, the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office announced that Little Miss Nobody had finally been identified as Sharon Lee Gallegos. Gallegos had lived in Alamogordo, New Mexico with her mother Lupe, along with her two older siblings and her grandmother. Her father, a soldier, had left the family when Gallegos was young. Her family was not wealthy and was supported by her mother, who worked as a maid in a nearby motel. But despite the financial hardship, the family was very close. Sharon was described as a feisty and happy-go-lucky child who enjoyed running errands with her mother and played with her siblings as well as other children in the neighborhood. However, the young girl's behavior soon began to change in the weeks leading to her disappearance. She no longer seemed to want to play outside alone and was becoming more scared of going outside in general. At approximately 3 p.m. on July 21st, 1960, every parent's nightmare took place. Sharon was approached by a man and a woman while playing with her two cousins in an alley near her Virginia Avenue home. The couple offered to buy the girl candy and new clothes if she would get in the car with them, and when Sharon refused, she was grabbed by the arm and forced into a dirty old green car, which was now believed to be a 1951 or 52 Dodge or Plymouth sedan, by the female abductor, who had exited the vehicle and approached Sharon. This woman would later be described as a short, heavy-set lady in her 30s with dirty blonde hair, and the male abductor was described as a thin and long-nosed man with sandy-colored hair. At the time of her disappearance, Sharon was wearing pink shorts, white shoes, and had light brown, blondish hair. Surrounding the abduction, it would become speculated that the girl and her family were stalked for weeks prior to her disappearance, with the suspected couple parking in similar spots often, and even asking a group of children probing questions surrounding Sharon and her family, their green car being identified by several witnesses as the same vehicle that had been around weeks prior. Just who these people were and why they would abduct and murder an innocent child still remains a mystery. And although Little Miss Nobody has been identified, law enforcement still hopes that additional details will help trigger someone's memory and that these perpetrators can be brought to justice, or at the very least, if they are no longer with us, have their name tarnished in eternity for their horrific misdeeds. If you have any information that could assist in solving Sharon Lee Gallegos' case, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children by calling 1-800-THE-LOST, which is 1-800-843-5678. Any and all information that can help is welcomed. And although this case is a tragic one, at a minimum, Sharon and her surviving family members can now have a slight sliver of peace that Little Miss Nobody got her name back, and hopefully find hope that her case will eventually be solved, and that Sharon Lee Gallegos is no longer mysteriously missing. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Mysteriously Missing. Please do me a favor and share this video, as well as any of the other videos I've made, so that we can get more eyes on these cases. Don't forget to subscribe with the bell if you were new here, and hit the like button so that YouTube will push these cases to more people. I also wanted to say how much I truly appreciate your support of my channel, and I'll continue to do my best to make the content that you'll enjoy, and help as many people as I can. And until next time, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care. Human disappearances have been happening for centuries, and while some of them have perfectly valid explanations, others leave us scratching our heads and grappling with questions of what exactly happened. This is Mysteriously Missing, and these are 5 bizarre missing person cases that are still unsolved to this day. December 5th, 2015. 19-year-old Caitlin Atkins was in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. She had been there for 4 days with her mother and sister. Her sister Gabriella had just had a baby boy, so Caitlin was getting to know her nephew. Caitlin, who was set to depart on December 7th, was headed back to Arizona, where she had moved just 1 year prior to live with her girlfriend, Amber Rios. She had just recently graduated high school and was set to pick up her diploma on the trip as well, so she could continue her new career training at a school of cosmetology. As the day came, her mom Lisa wasn't able to find her a ride, so she called her ex-husband James to see if he could give her a ride to the airport instead. Lisa then dropped Caitlin off with James at approximately 9:20 a.m. There was a mall beside the metro station, so James, after catching up with Caitlin, dropped her off at the mall and gave her $20 to get to the metro so she could catch her flight home. She was dropped off at approximately 1:52 p.m. Anticipating her girlfriend's arrival, Amber reached out to Caitlin, but received a text back the following day, which said something came up. "I'm not coming back today, and I'll let you know when I get a new flight, and I won't be able to text for a bit." Amber then messaged Lisa and asked what was going on, because this was not like Caitlin at all. As far as Lisa was aware, James dropped Caitlin off at the mall and gave her some money for the metro so that she could catch her departing flight home. And things from here were just not adding up. After multiple texts and calls went unanswered, the two began to worry about Caitlin. After reaching back out to James to confirm that he did indeed drop her off near the metro, and that she had not told him of any additional plans to visit with a friend or anything else, Lisa wasted no time and quickly reporting Caitlin missing. The police had to establish where Caitlin was last seen and began to gather all available evidence. James had said that he dropped her off outside of the JCPenney store at the mall, but there was no CCTV footage in the area at the time, so they couldn't determine when and if she entered the mall at all. They also didn't know at any stage if she had entered Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, but they were indeed able to confirm that she had missed her flight. So if she wasn't on the flight home, then where was she? As the investigation persisted, Lisa told the police that it was unusual that Caitlin had requested to be dropped off at the mall, and not directly at the metro station, because the last time she had visited that mall in particular was when she was a young child, and that she wouldn't have been familiar with the layout whatsoever. After receiving this information, police then pinged Caitlin's cell phone. Looking at the location records, they had discovered that she had sent a text message saying she was at the airport. Her phone had actually pinged more than 30 miles from the Springfield metro stop. She couldn't have been at the airport or at the mall at that time. The last message sent pinged off a cell phone tower in Stafford, and police believe that she never left the Fredericksburg area. They also could not confirm if it was Caitlin herself who had indeed sent the messages to begin with. Just one day after Caitlin disappeared, the body of a young woman was discovered, and everyone initially feared the worst. However, tragically, but fortunately in this case in particular, it was not Caitlin. It was the body of a woman named Heather Giacone, found in a vehicle parked outside a local residence. She had been found with a bullet wound in her head. Although the body discovered was not the one police were searching for, could the two cases have been related? Shortly after this discovery, another discovery was made. Caitlin's luggage was found 50 miles away from the airport, and it had seemed that the suitcase had been thrown from a moving car. Her wallet, ID, and phone charger were all inside the suitcase, but her clothes, phone, and high school diploma were all missing. From here, the police decided to question James, who would have been the last person to have been in contact with Caitlin. He agreed to undergo a polygraph test, but refused to give police access to his phone. Furthermore, James had told Lisa that he was due to return to work at 3 p.m. on December the 5th, and that was why he had to drop Caitlin off early. But he never returned to work that day, and as a matter of fact, he never returned back to that job at all. Although suspicious for sure, the police could not conclusively prove that James had anything to do with her disappearance. They then decided to trace any friends that could have known where she decided to go. One of Caitlin's friends who was contacted stated that the night before she was set to depart, Caitlin had been drinking at a party and had had sexual relations with several men. She had then felt guilty that she had cheated on Amber, and these soon became questions that could have motivated her to leave on her own accord. However, her family refutes these accusations, because when they had spoken to and interacted with Caitlin the morning of December 5th, she seemed completely fine and not hungover or anything of the sort. To date, Caitlin has still not been found, but her family still continues to search for her and asks that we continue to share her story in pursuit of finding her. She's described as 5'4", weighing approximately 122 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She has a distinct butterfly tattoo on her left forearm and stars on her right foot. If you have any information, please contact the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office at 540-582-7115. Every year as winter approaches, the Zorro family is once again reminded of the last conversation they had with their daughter. Danica Childs was set to attend a planned shopping trip on December 21st of 2007 in Federal Way, Washington. Danica Zorro, Danica Childs' mother, said that she had spoken to her daughter that fateful day and said that it was just a normal conversation. She didn't think anything was out of the ordinary. Since it was a planned shopping trip with her sisters, she believed she'd be seeing them all fairly soon at her house. After hanging up, Zorro remembered something that she was going to tell her daughter and proceeded to call her back. But this time, and every time that followed, just went straight to voicemail. When Danica missed her shopping trip and then wasn't seen by friends the very next day, her mother contacted the police. In the days that followed, disturbing details would begin to emerge that Danica was living a double life. Her mother first learned of this after speaking to a friend who had confirmed that Danica had been staying at their house the night she disappeared. The night prior to her disappearance, she was frequenting a local motel, which was notorious for drug abuse and prostitution. After this startling revelation, even more troubling details began to emerge. Danica's phone, coat, and purse had all been found at this particular motel, but Danica was missing without a trace. After gaining access to her daughter's phone and search for answers, Zorro listened to a series of disturbing and heartbreaking messages that confirmed that her daughter was involved in prostitution. The messages, which hadn't been listened to, started from the time that Zorro had first tried to call her daughter back, suggesting that Danica may have disappeared shortly after their phone call. Additional details, such as who and why Danica, a young bright girl who seemed to have her whole life ahead of her, would be involved in such things, are still unknown, but drugs could have played a factor. Danica Childs has never been found. Her family still holds out hope that she is alive, and her search still continues. Her mother, Danica Zorro, has since become an anti-human trafficking advocate and is part of the Federal Way Community Action Team dedicated to stopping human trafficking in their local area. If you have any information on this case, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST at 1-800-843-5678. Shortly after midnight on Valentine's Day 2000, Aisha's father tucked her into bed without issue, and when a nearby car accident caused the family's neighborhood to be without power, her father then checked on her again to find her sound asleep. What followed has left her family, local police, and the FBI at a loss. Aisha shared a room with her older brother, who said that he had heard her bed squeaking in the middle of the night, but he just attributed this to her moving in her sleep. But Aisha was not sleeping. She packed a black backpack, a t-shirt, a library book, and gathered her raincoat. From here, she stepped outside into the rainy night. She was last seen by two drivers who reported her on the side of North Carolina Highway 18 around 4 a.m. One of the drivers turned around and asked her if she was okay, but Aisha simply ran into the nearby woods, and from here, she has never been seen again. A year and a half after her disappearance, her backpack was found by construction workers while they were digging on an access road, 30 miles away from where she was last seen. It held a New Kids on the Block t-shirt and a Dr. Seuss book. Although the police were certain it was Aisha's, the discovery did not produce any new leads. The case then went cold until 2004, when a prison inmate claimed she had been killed and that he knew where she had been buried. Investigators followed up on these leads, but only found animal remains. What would prompt a little girl to leave in the middle of a rainy night? Was it family dysfunction or abuse? We can never know for sure, but her family and the authorities still continue to search for her. They keep a local billboard of her missing poster within their community to keep people aware, and have established a scholarship in her name. If you have any information in regards to this case, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST or 1-800-843-5678. A cash reward is being offered. September 24th, 1992, in Columbia, South Carolina. Dale Dinwiddie had just moved back home after completing an art history degree at Randolph-Macon Women's College in Lynchburg, Virginia. While she waited for her new classes to begin at the University of South Carolina, she began to spend her time volunteering at a nearby art museum and would often babysit a family friend's son. The boy she looked over this very day was named John Parker, whose 8th birthday was also the same day. Dale was due to pick him up from the bus stop after school and walk him home, but that morning at 6:15 a.m., her father noticed that she wasn't in her bedroom. Her lights and radio were on, but her bed had not been slept in. He then asked his wife if Dale had had any plans to stay the night at a friend's house, to which she said no. This soon sent alarm bells ringing, because not only was their daughter very open with her plans, but also was known for being extremely organized and timely. After confirming that their daughter had not arrived to walk with John, and also after contacting her friends who hadn't seen her since the night before, the Dinwiddies soon reported their daughter missing. The night before, Dale had gone to a U2 concert with a friend who had had an extra ticket. Afterwards, the two met several more friends at a local bar, which was centered in a busy area known for nightlife, food, and entertainment. The police determined that the concert ended at 11:15 p.m., and that her friends had left the bar without Dale at approximately 1 a.m. When police asked why they had left Dale at the bar, they said that they had believed that she had already went home before them because they couldn't find her. But upon speaking to other regulars and employees at the bar, the police uncovered that Dale was indeed still at the bar around 1:15 a.m. and was looking for her friends. A bouncer last saw her walking north on Hardin Street towards the Green and Hardin Streets intersection. She was alone and appeared to be in a hurry. Dale did not take her purse with her, and she had left it at the bar. She has never been seen again. Thousands of flyers and hundreds of volunteers went in search for her, but all was to no avail. And due to the circumstances of her disappearance, the police believe that she may have been abducted. If you have any information, please contact 803-233-8474. Brian Schaefer seemed to have a very bright future ahead of him. Now into his second year of medical school, he was ready for a break. With spring break just beginning, Brian met his roommate and a few other friends and began bar hopping. Another event that he was looking forward to was a trip with his girlfriend, Alexis Wagner. Schaefer called her to not only confirm their vacation together, but to tell her that he loved her, and little did she know that this would be the last time that she would ever speak to Brian again. After several shots and beers, the two men made their way to the Arena District in Short North. Here they met a friend of Brian's roommate who offered to drive the two men back to their previous bar, which was a local watering hole called the Ugly Tuna. As security footage would later show, all three of them rode the escalator to the bar's second story at approximately 1:15 a.m. For reasons unknown, Schaefer re-emerged outside before 2 a.m. and was seen chatting with two ladies before vanishing. The two men he was with attempted to find him, but when that failed, the two called Brian multiple times, also to no avail. Calls from Brian's father, Randy, and his girlfriend went unanswered for the rest of the weekend, and when Brian missed his flight on Monday morning, he was reported missing immediately. During the next few days, up to 50 cops searched for him. All of his friends and relatives were questioned, and everyone except his roommate consented to and passed a polygraph test. For some strange reason, the two women he was last seen talking with were not asked to take tests. Investigators began to ponder that perhaps Brian could have faked his disappearance. Perhaps he changed clothes and exited through the side entrance, which led to a chaotic construction zone. But Brian's family has always insisted that he had no motive to fake his disappearance, and indeed he had more to look forward to than to escape from. Brian Schaefer's credit cards, bank accounts, and cell phone haven't had any activity since his disappearance. His remaining family only consists of his younger brother, who is still searching for him. If alive, Brian would be 42 years old. If you have any information, please contact the Central Ohio Crime Stoppers at 614-461-8477. A $100,000 reward is being offered. Thank you guys so much for watching the latest episode of Mysteriously Missing. These are 5 bizarre missing person cases that are still unsolved to this day. And frankly, I think we need to get some more eyes on them, because perhaps someone somewhere knows details that could help. If you enjoy the content, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe with the bell with notifications on so that you never miss a new video. And until next time, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care. Since the 80s, the cruise industry has enjoyed a steady growth both in popularity and revenue. Massive floating cities heading towards exotic destinations have been enough to draw large amounts of vacationers for several decades now, with little to no signs of waning. However, such a promise of luxury is not without its dark underbelly. Since 2000, there has been approximately 313 documented missing person cases that have occurred from cruise ships, with only 10% of those cases ever being resolved. This is the story of one of these cases that still baffles the public and authorities alike to this day. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Rebecca Corium. Rebecca Corium was born in Chester, England, where she grew up with her parents, her sister Rachel, and 2 foster brothers. After finishing school at Chester Catholic High School, she got a job at the Chester Zoo, where she had relatives working at the time. Shortly after this time, she received an opportunity for a position with Disney Cruise Lines, and in June 2010, she went to London for her interview. After being hired by Disney, she was quickly sent to Florida for training, and after 4 months on cruises to the Bahamas, she was designated a youth worker, a role she very much enjoyed. And after receiving this post, she would depart to England, where she returned home to attend the funeral of her late grandfather. This would be the last time the Corium family would ever see Rebecca again. She returned to the Disney cruise ship the Wonder, and 6 weeks later, on March 21st, 2011, the day the ship left the Los Angeles area, she sent what would be her last message to her parents on Facebook, telling them that she would call them the next day. However, when the call never arrived, her mother grew concerned and followed her reply, but hours passed without a response. What followed has not only baffled the authorities, but Rebecca's family as well. There's lots of speculation that we will touch upon as far as what happened to her, but this is what we know from the authorities first. At 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, that morning on the Wonder, off the coast of Mexico, bound for Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas, Rebecca had missed her shift. She was not in her room or anywhere else on the ship. She did not respond to the pages over the ship's public address system. A review of the CCTV footage found just one appearance of her from earlier in the morning, timestamped at 5:45 a.m. She can be seen talking to someone on the ship's internal phones in the crew area, and she appears distraught. A young man quickly approaches her and appears to ask if everything was all right, to which her mouth can be seen saying, "Yeah, I'm fine." After this, Rebecca hangs up and then walks away from the area, pushing her hair back and putting her hands in her back pockets. Besides this footage, there was no trace of Rebecca's presence found on the ship, and she has never been seen again. The investigation that followed was conducted by both the U.S. Coast Guard with the assistance of the Mexican Navy. They searched international waters through which the Wonder had been sailing through at the time, but unfortunately, they did not find anything. The captain of the Wonder drew his own conclusions about the case as well. He believed that a rogue wave had hit Deck 5, where he believed Rebecca had been, and tragically swept her out to sea. However, there is no evidence, CCTV footage or otherwise, to support this theory, and there is much, much more to the story, at least according to several people. You see, Rebecca was a lesbian, a secret she had long tried to keep tucked away from her family, who disapproved. This could perhaps be part of the reason why she decided to take a job that was so far from home. While working on the Wonder, she had met and was dating a woman by the name of Tracy Medley. Tracy, when interviewed by The Sun years later, would reveal some interesting and disturbing details about Rebecca, all of which I'm going to share with you, but should be taken with a grain of salt, like all speculation surrounding this case. She said she believed that Rebecca could have committed suicide, and often used cocaine to self-medicate due to her poor mental health. She also claimed the night of her disappearance that Rebecca had been drinking heavily and had had some sort of a mental breakdown. According to Tracy, her and 3 others tried to help Rebecca get back to her room when she began to scream, cry, and punch herself in the face, along with banging her head against the walls of the ship. Later that same night, Rebecca also allegedly said something along the lines of feeling like a failure because she wasn't brave enough to jump off the ship. Tracy then went on to say that she and Rebecca had spent the evening of March 21st of 2011 with Medley's boyfriend, a man by the name of Devin Hyde, who was a bartender on the ship. Tracy then said Rebecca then got up in the early morning hours and was never seen again. She believed that she had committed suicide because she had previously revealed thoughts of wanting to do so earlier in the night and had apparently attempted said behavior in the past. But she denies having any involvement in her disappearance whatsoever. But something is just not right. Again, take all of this with a grain of salt, but this is my take, my opinion. It could certainly have been possible that Rebecca had some sort of substance issue and was self-medicating to treat her own mental health. These issues affect so many people, it's absurd. But with Rebecca being actively working each day, would there not have been evidence of this by her superiors? According to Disney's own policy, they don't drug test applicants after they've been offered the job. So if she was using substance, they wouldn't have been testing for it. So it is indeed possible. However, if she was essentially blackout drunk the night of her disappearance and had to be escorted to her room, according to Tracy, and was having a mental breakdown in the process, why is there no footage of this? I'm no expert, but for legal reasons, I'd imagine there has to be CCTV footage pretty much everywhere on that ship, especially at the bar. Why would that not have been mentioned in the investigation? And my guess is because it didn't happen. But wait, it gets worse. Tracy's story seems to change because when she states that her and Rebecca spent the night with her boyfriend in his room, my guess is they were having sexual relations. But I thought Rebecca was a lesbian and often struggled with this fact. I'm not here to argue anyone's sexuality, but things to me are just not quite adding up. She then apparently gets up in the middle of the night, leaves the boyfriend's room, and then is never seen again. And if someone, anyone, a friend, a girlfriend, a coworker, is blackout drunk and you get with them, that obviously voids any form of consent. You clearly are taking advantage of that person, and amidst a mental breakdown no less. And then the ship's captain believes a rogue wave hit her despite there being zero evidence of this. Nothing reported on the radars, no footage. I think someone or a group of people who were on that ship know something that they're not telling. And I'm not the only one that thinks so. Labor MP Chris Matheson, who represented the city of Chester's constituency since the 2015 election, believes that Corium was the victim of a crime. That she could have possibly been murdered, sexually assaulted, or both. He also stated the obvious that any sort of rogue wave that could have hit the ship would have caused significant damage. If Rebecca was where Tracy said she was, the 5th floor or higher, the wave would have had to have been 100 feet at a minimum to sweep someone away. 100 feet is very significant. Don't you think the crew, the passengers, and everyone would know what hit them? Rebecca's parents also don't believe she was suicidal whatsoever, and she had made several long-term plans to have both her family visit her place in the United States, as well as coming back home to England to visit them. They also refuted claims of their opinion of her sexuality. So someone is lying. Disney has been reached out for comment multiple times in regards to this case, and always states that the investigation is ongoing, but it has reached a point to where they have simply stopped replying. And I think, and this is just my opinion, that Rebecca was probably not involved in any sort of a love triangle, and Tracy, along with her boyfriend, coerced or even forced Rebecca, either sober or intoxicated, into Devin's room, and God knows what happened. She was then either pushed or thrown overboard. This would help fill any gaps in the story along with the lack of evidence, since she has never been found. This entire case is not only disturbing, but extremely sad, and I pray her family one day will get the closure and the investigation that they truly deserve, so that Rebecca Corium will no longer be mysteriously missing. To date, no one has been charged with a crime. An investigation is still ongoing, but with no leads. The Coriums have since sued Disney, but settled out of court for an undisclosed sum of money, and an agreement not to disclose any further details publicly. Jim Walker, the attorney who represented the family, believes Disney has more evidence than it has provided, and that this evidence has been potentially withheld or destroyed in an attempt to cover up what happened, to save them further legal trouble. and take with that what you will. All around, this is a sad but interesting case. If you enjoyed this video, please consider watching any of the other mysteriously missing episodes, where I cover a plethora of missing person cases that could use more exposure than what they have. If you have a case you'd like to see covered, please leave it down in the comments below along with your thoughts. And don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe with notifications on. And as always, this has been Cody here with Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care. Voicemail is undoubtedly a great way to convey a message to someone when they're unavailable. Whether this be to deliver some important and worthy news, or just to catch up and say hello. But unfortunately, from time to time, we receive news that isn't so great via voicemail as well. In today's episode, a woman by the name of Mildred Young received a disturbing voicemail that shook her to her core. It wasn't a prankster, or a scammer, or a misdial. The person on the other end was her daughter, and after Mildred heard her bizarre and terrifying message, she would never be seen again. But there are many details to this story, so join us as we attempt to put the pieces together. This is Mysteriously Missing, and this is the disappearance of Diane Agate. On Wednesday, April 15th of 1998, 59-year-old Mildred Young heard a woman's voice crying out for help on her answering machine. The woman's voice was clearly tense and alarmed by what was going on around her. This was followed by a scuffling sound, which could be made clear that someone on the other end was attempting to pull the phone away from the woman speaking. The woman on the other end could be heard screaming, "Give me that," before the call came to a quick and abrupt end. While most people wouldn't think twice about such a call, thinking it was a malicious prank or a misdial of some sort, or at the very least a strange misunderstanding, Mildred knew better. After all, her daughter was diagnosed with several mental illnesses, and after a number of troubling personal relationships, she was not doing well. She had already been missing for several days, and the woman's voice on the other end of the phone was unmistakably her. Diane Louise Young was born on February 21st of 1958 to her parents James and Mildred Young. While Diane grew up in New York, she would end up relocating to Florida along with the rest of her family, specifically in the area surrounding Tampa, where she began to plant her roots. In the late 1970s, Diane would marry Frederick Agate, taking on his surname. For a time, she seemed to live a pretty idyllic life, becoming a stay-at-home wife, taking care of the couple's 3 children, and not only being a loving mother to the children, but making it a point and pride to provide them with a clean and orderly home. Unfortunately, in the late 1980s, after a brief period of bizarre behavior, Diane would be diagnosed with manic depressive disorder, which today is known as bipolar disorder. She would begin to treat this mental illness with medication, but over time her condition would grow worse and her mental health would begin to suffer as a result. In 1988, Diane was alleged to have committed child abuse by the state, and her children were unfortunately removed from her custody. Then, in 1991, after a period of turbulent behavior, Diane and her longtime husband, Frederick, would divorce. He would retain custody of their children, and this would become the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for Diane's mental health. Over the next several years, Diane would begin to unravel. She not only began to frequent local jails, but mental health facilities as well. Her brother-in-law, Al Finkelstein, would later recount to reporters in the Tampa area that she was constantly talking to herself, and you can tell right away that she's mentally ill. During this time, Diane would begin to develop a drinking problem and would also begin to dabble in drug abuse, both of which would exacerbate her already existing mental health issues. She would be involuntarily committed to mental health facilities at least 32 times under the Baker Act, which allowed a judge, police officer, or doctor to decide whether or not someone was mentally ill enough to pose a danger to themselves or others. Her last known involuntary committal came in 1998, which resulted in her being released to the care of her loved ones later that spring. However, upon release to her family, it would become blatantly obvious that she was desperately in need of institutionalized care. On April 10th of 1998, Diane was last seen alive by her family for the very last time. She had been released from a mental health facility just 2 weeks prior after being sent there for an involuntary evaluation. She had since been staying with her sister, and while Diane had previously been living in Odessa, her family thought it was best for her to be with her family for the time being. On the morning of April 10th, Diane was last seen by her sister, who ended up leaving for a doctor's appointment that morning. And when she returned later that day, she found Diane missing from her home, and it would be reported that Diane was missing from her home at around 11 a.m. that day. Later that same day, Diane would be seen at the Hayloft Tavern, which was located along Little Road and State Road 52. There, Diane stayed until she was kicked out, with Diane's mother, Mildred Young, later recounting to the Tampa Bay Times. The bartender cut her off because she was walking in circles, and to my knowledge, that was the last time anyone saw her. After attempting to track her down and being unsuccessful, Diane's family would then report her missing the next day, on April 11th. While Diane had been known to disappear in the past, she generally only did for a day or two. This was usually when she lapsed on her medication, or just simply stopped taking them. But in this case in particular, Diane would go missing for several days, leading to the mysterious voicemail received by her mother on April 15th, just 5 days after her initial disappearance. To Diane's loved ones, this call seemed to confirm that Diane was in serious trouble at the time, especially since this was her longest and most unusual disappearance act yet. When Mildred would attempt to call the number back Diane had originally dialed from, the name Starlight would appear on her caller ID, but attempts to redial would go unanswered. And at that time, there was only one business in the area that was known as Starlight, and it was a strip club known as the Starlight Lounge. However, it is unknown that there is a connection between the two. On Wednesday, April 15th, 5 days after Diane Agate left her sister's home in Hudson, a human finger was found along US Route 19 near New York Avenue. This discovery was made at approximately 4 p.m. by a woman that was walking to work. She thought the finger was just a toy or a prop of some sort. However, when the woman told her boyfriend about it, the following day the two ventured out to the location and rediscovered the finger, which was painted with red nail polish and was real. They then would reach out to the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, who arrived at the scene shortly thereafter to document the find. In an attempt to figure out just who this finger belonged to, authorities would match up with their own records and quickly discovered that the finger belonged to the missing Diane Agate. Because Diane had been arrested in the past, she had been fingerprinted, and this was unfortunately a match. Authorities would then begin to search throughout the nearby area where Diane's finger was found, and would eventually bring out a helicopter to scan the area from the skies. Unfortunately, these efforts would prove fruitless, because no other trace of the missing 40-year-old would be found, and subsequential attempts to find her at her home and regular haunts were unsuccessful in the days and weeks to come. Police did not believe that Diane had left on her own accord. In an official statement, the Pasco County Sheriff's Office told reporters that she apparently did not have a vehicle. She either hitchhiked or got rides from friends. This, paired with Diane's overly trusting behavior when off her medication, led them to believe that she might have willingly gone with someone who intended to do her harm. On the same day the story of Diane's disappearance began to break in the Tampa area, a discovery would be made at a convenience store that Diane often frequented. This occurred in Odessa, Florida, about 25 miles north of Tampa. A convenience store manager discovered a pile of neatly folded clothes in an outdoor freezer, immediately recognizing the clothing as Diane's. Patricia would reach out to Deborah, Diane's sister, who confirmed that the clothing was in fact hers. Police would immediately begin to theorize that the clothing may have been put in the freezer by someone that had abducted Diane. Unfortunately, it would be almost impossible to determine when the clothing had exactly been put in the outdoor freezer, since the staff at the convenience store hadn't checked it in approximately 3 weeks since her disappearance. Over the next several weeks, authorities would receive dozens of tips from potential witnesses that believed they had seen Diane in the surrounding area. This included one witness who claimed to have seen her on the afternoon of April 11th, between 3 and 4 p.m., walking along New York Avenue. This would have put her in the location where the finger was later found. Another witness, a waitress at a nearby inn, would claim to have seen Diane on the same day that the ominous phone call was made to her mother. But it's unknown if investigators were able to confirm this sighting, and if they did, they haven't released any information to date. Unfortunately, none of these tips have seemed to have panned into anything worthwhile, with investigators being unable to locate any part of Diane since her disappearance, besides her severed finger. Unfortunately, none of these tips have seemed to have panned to anything worthwhile, and Diane has never been seen again. Her case had seemingly gone cold until November of 2000, when her parents began to reminisce about Diane's life openly. They started from the beginning, when her mental illness began to make itself present, when her abuse allegations caused her to lose custody of her children, and then the divorce of her longtime husband seemed to slowly but surely unravel her. She seemed to have become an entirely different person seemingly overnight, and had begun to take solace in alcohol and substance. Just one day after her family reminisced about her publicly, there was an article that was published in the Tampa Bay Times, and another bizarre discovery would be made at the convenience store that Diane often went to. That Saturday, Terry Wilson, the girlfriend of Diane's brother, walked into a Circle K convenience store along Highway 19, just north of Hudson near Villa Villas, a neighborhood that Diane was often in. There, inside the convenience store, on top of the lottery ticket counter, Terry would find a bag of random knickknacks which had the name Diane written on them in black marker. Believing that this might have been something to do with her boyfriend's missing sister, Terry took this bag back to Diane's family and then informed the police about her discovery. This clear plastic bag contained items that Diane would have been using at the time of her disappearance: Taboo perfume, black eyeliner, bright pink lipstick, as well as a generic brand of toothpaste. Coincidentally, this would have been the same type of toothpaste that would have been issued by the mental health facility that Diane had just been released from. Authorities would announce that they were going to review the security tape from the convenience store in the hopes of determining who had placed the bag on the counter. However, it seems like nothing has come of this lead. Unfortunately, since this time there has been little to no activity or developments in Diane's case in nearly 2 decades, with her disappearance remaining just as unsolved today as it was back in 1998. Diane Agate was 40 years old and was last seen in April of 1998, where she had been known to be staying with her sister at her home at Hudson's Cobblestone Drive. She had a sad history of mental illness and substance abuse, and was also known to be incredibly trusting when not on her medication. For that reason, it is believed that she may have willingly been in the company of people that intended to do her harm. While rumors have persisted about sightings of Diane in the Tampa area from time to time, there has been no confirmed sighting of her since the second week of April in 1998. If she is still alive today, she would be approximately 63 years old, and likely still suffering from bipolar disorder. She stood around 5 feet 4 inches tall at the time of her disappearance, and weighed approximately 130 pounds. She had dark strawberry blonde hair, which likely would have grayed with age. There is still a $3,000 reward that exists for information leading to her current whereabouts, and anyone with information is encouraged to call Crime Stoppers of Tampa Bay at 1-800-873-TIPS. This story is a perplexing and sad one, and I pray that her family discovers what happened to her, so that Diane Agate will no longer be mysteriously missing. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Mysteriously Missing. Below you will find a pinned comment of the playlist of all episodes that you can watch, so we can shed more light on the cases that have been covered so far. If you have a case you'd like me to cover, please submit it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe with notifications on, and share this video on social media. And until next time, this has been Cody here with Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care.